Oh yeah, something's changing. I can feel it. Here's a full-on Mars landing forehead flash for you.
Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How are my teeth?
Nice and white.
Good. Good. That's all the webcam. I actually don't have any teeth and a full head of hair, but I really need to upgrade my webcam.
I
Hey, that's not too bad. It's all right.
I think we could just talk about your teeth the rest of the show.
Still look middle-aged though.
You're still bald.
Oh, are you talking? Kind of quiet. Hang on. Right now?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Are you recording?
Yes.
All right.
So, how'd you enjoy Pork Fest?
Ah, man, it was a lot of work. Man, I mean, I was talking for hours a day on shows and podcasts. My favorite was I thought the roast of Christopher Lawless went pretty well, and I rewrote the lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody as Bohemian Anarchy, and led a couple of hundred people in a rousing, spontaneous organization sing along, and that was a huge amount of fun, and way more fun than your average old speech. So I had a great time. And the weather was not too bad either. It rained sort of one afternoon, but not too bad.
Did you catch the proposal?
I did. I cried. I cried. I did. I think they're such a great couple, and they're such wonderful parents. And I was moved. I was moved to tears. What can I say? I'm a softie.
Well, that brings me to my first question.
Go for it.
Um, from your philosophical standpoint, do you believe that marriage is a flawed concept?
Oh, I think that marriage is a wonderful concept. Marriage is the best thing that I ever did was get married to the right person. If you if you get that done, everything else kind of falls in place. I think that marriage is really distorted and mutated at the moment by a variety of statist incentives. I mean, so you have the piece of paper. Who cares about that? Give the government a piece of paper and $50, and who cares? And you get on with your life. But marriage has been really warped by separating fatherhood from the family, right? So if you remember this Life of Julia thing that Barack Obama did recently, this is a woman who apparently has never even heard of men. She has a baby, she raises the baby, she gets health care and education for the baby, all without a man. And this is tragic. This is tragic. Kids need both parents. They need gentle, calm, peaceful upbringing, at least according to all of the experts I've talked to and my own experience. And so I think marriage, the way we have it kind of now, with the welfare state, with alimony, with child support, with public schools, it has really broken apart the necessity of a provider. And that provider is traditionally male, though of course it can be female. But I think that's just tragic. What has happened to the family and to marriage? It's become just another one of these statist institutions that's been warped by bad incentives and bad laws.
So why do you think it is that over half the marriages fail, and that's the ones that are reported on? Is it because of the state, or is the concept of marriage flawed?
I don't think the concept of marriage is flawed. It is what evolved in general over the course of human evolution. Children need massive amounts of resources to be raised. I mean, your brain doesn't stop developing until you're about 25. That's a quarter century. And of course, up to the age of 18 these days, or sort of mid-teens, your body and your mind are still developing enormously. So you just need a huge amount of resources. A horse can run a day or two after it's born. It takes a human being 2 years to pull that off. So I don't think there's anything wrong with marriage as a concept. I think that people have lost their moral center in the sort of postmodern world. We had religion as an answer to morality, and that's becoming less and less credible to a lot of people. And we haven't had philosophy to replace it yet. And patriotism doesn't do you much good in terms of maintaining the stability of your marriage. And so I think that because people have lost their values, they are adrift, and also people aren't taught what to look for in a spouse. I mean, what you look for in a spouse is money and good carbs. And if you can't find those, you need to look for shared, rational, philosophical values, a commitment to virtue, a commitment to how it is that you're going to raise your kids, what style of parenting, hopefully nonviolent, peaceful, and virtuous. But people, they think, you talk to most teenage girls, and what are they looking for? Someone who's cute and funny. I mean, what does that have to do with someone's ability to help you raise kids at 3 o'clock in the morning when two of your kids have been up coughing half the night? It doesn't really do you much good at all. So I think that people need to be a lot more sensible, a lot more rational about what it is that they're looking for in a mate. They need to have conversations about shared values. And I've talked to a whole bunch of couples in my work at Free Domain Radio because I'm really interested in the philosophy of relationships. And they've been married for 5 years or 10 years or longer. They've never had a conversation about values. What is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false. People go into marriage not even knowing whether the partner wants to raise the children religious or secular. It's a huge, huge issue. And so I think that a lack of shared values and a lack of commitment to do the difficult things, and we all understand an athlete has to do difficult things to be at the top of his or her game. The same thing's true in marriage. You have to talk about things that are uncomfortable. You have to keep the lines of communication open. You have to do all of these wonderful things to make sure that you have a great marriage. And it's going to be my 10th anniversary. And this is after a number of relationships that didn't work out for me in the past. And I'm, happier every day, more in love every day. And so it can work, but you need the same values and you need to keep communicating, especially when it's uncomfortable.
Do you think the idea of monogamy is the flawed part of marriage? Like many other species, they're not monogamous. Were humans meant to be monogamous? And if they were, why do so many couples cheat on each other? And that's part of the reason for the divorces.
Sorry, I'm not sure what type of wood your dining room table is, how that's relevant to. Oh, sorry, did you say monogamy?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. Well, I do think that monogamy is essential for a marriage that involves children. I mean, and by the way, when I say essential, I just mean I think there's really good arguments to be made in favor of it. I certainly don't mean to say that it's moral and necessary or required. First of all, if you make a vow, one of the most serious, if not the most serious vow or contract you're ever going to make in your life is to your spouse. So if you say when you get married that you are going to be true, if you're going to forswear all others, if you're going to be monogamous, then that's what you need to stick to, or you need to, tell the person that you have a change of heart, but before you go and have an affair or whatever, you need to keep that commitment. And then if you're not going to keep that commitment, you need to be upfront about that and negotiate something else, even if it's the end of the marriage. But you make a commitment, and that's what you need to do. Monogamy is very important when it's not important if you're just, in a system or a time of chaos, with war and famine and starvation and chaos in society. Most men will take a pretty short-term reproductive strategy, which is, have sex with as many women as possible and just hope that one of your offspring makes it to adulthood. In a time of relative peace and harmony, which is more or less where we are in the West still, at least for now, you have a different reproductive strategy, which is you need to have a child and raise the child and invest into your child or your children. That really only works when you have a monogamous relationship, because if you have sex outside the relationship and there's pregnancies, then your focus gets split and the whole investment into your offspring gets really chaotic and problematic, and cross-pollination is not good for stability. So for people who say, well, I don't need monogamy and polyamory or whatever is the way to go, to me it tells me that they've come from a pretty chaotic childhood where they've kind of been the epigenetics of their reproductive strategy is such that they feel that sort of spreading the seed like a frog is the way to go, and that is a reasonable strategy when you're in a time of chaos or in a place of chaos. But if you're in a society of relative peace and stability, I think monogamy and a significant investment in kids is the most productive strategy.
You were on Peter Schiff recently. He mentioned that the next president is going to oversee the crash of the dollar. Do you believe that to be true?
Predictions. I'm reminded of David Friedman. I introduced him at libertopia.org last year, and he said that he's been listening to libertarians predict the end of Western society for about 35 years. So these kinds of predictions are very difficult, but I do think that mathematically it doesn't seem possible that it's going to last another half decade. So I would put a few more of my chips on Peter Schiff's side of the predictions than not. I do think that Europe is fast approaching crisis, and the entire monetary system is held together by prayers, Peter Pan dust, and spider webs, and one sneeze, and it all comes crashing down. And those sneezes seem to be accelerating around the table. What have they had? 19 or 20 emergency summits over the euro over the past couple of months, and Germany, Angela Merkel just swore that she was never going to allow for a common debt structure because that's obviously just rewarding the least responsible and most profligate countries and punishing those who have any kind of fiscal restraint. And in other words, it's Mediterranean versus the ancient barbarian Huns along the Rhine. And so I think that the crash of the dollar and a collapse, a Great Depression, these are all tough words because they mean a lot of different things to different people. But I can't imagine how for another half decade things are going to go on the way that they have been going on. And I think when the change comes, it's going to be pretty ferocious. I think it was about 6 years ago, I said it was going to be sort of 5 to 15 years that the major crisis was going to be. And so we're a year into my prediction. So I'm going to stick by what I said in 2006. And so I think that he's probably right. And I think people should, get some food in the basement and be prepared to, tide over any possible temporary interruptions in the food supply.
Okay, I spoke to you earlier about, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Defu. Can you just explain a little bit about that for someone who might not know it?
Well, it's very easy. The word defu it indicates somebody who, along with a therapist's help, has decided to take a break from his or her family of origin as a result of significant and severe dysfunction and abuse. So if you want to have a good analogy for the word is pretty much the same as divorce. And divorce, of course, as you say, is rampant. And these are chosen relationships. I mean, a husband and wife get to choose. They get to take them for a test drive, date them, and get engaged and get married eventually. So they have years usually that they test drive. Of course, nobody ever chooses his or her parents. And so the concept of defu is just to say, look, adult relationships are voluntary. And we understand that if a woman is being severely abused by her husband, that she has the right and the option to leave. And it may be, in fact, in her best interest to do so, but she should definitely take advantage of a professional therapist during that transition. It's exactly the same thing with the concept of defu, that adult relationships are voluntary, that if you are being abused by your parents and you are an adult and you can get a hold of some psychological help, that it's something that should be looked into. We should not assume that parent-child relationships are absolutely unbreakable no matter how parents treat their children, any more than we should assume that marriages are unbreakable no matter how spouses treat each other.
We discussed 20, you said 20 known cases of defu with your supporters at FDR?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't know all of them, but if the few people who sort of let me know, out of probably over 250,000 listeners or more by now, Lord, we're going to hit the end of the year with about 75 million downloads. So yeah, there've been maybe 2 or 3 dozen cases that I've heard of, and all of the ones that I've heard of have involved, somebody goes to a therapist and they take it from there. It's certainly nothing that I sort of say, go do this, because, who am I to say? I mean, I'm just some podcast. But I do think it's important that we remember that adult relationships are voluntary, and we do not have to spend time with people who are relentlessly committed to abusing and harming us. I mean, that's just, we can't do much about the Federal Reserve when it comes to managing violence and aggression in our lives. We can't do much about foreign wars or foreign policy, but we can have the standard which says, I do not allow aggression in my own personal life.
All right, Stefan, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me, Ian.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me?
Yep. All right, you ready?
Sure.
All right. You mentioned to me, and I hope this is okay that I'm talking about what we talked privately about, but you said that the LP can never game. What did you mean by that?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to remember the context that we were talking about it.
I sent you the article about how the Libertarian Party might gain from no Paul being in the race in 2016.
Oh, right. Well, I guess it's conceivable that that could happen. Um, there are a lot of new libertarians in the world, thanks to Ron Paul, and they're going to have to try to go somewhere. I think, unfortunately, too many of them have gotten the lesson from Ron Paul that you too can be a Republican, when the lesson should have been, wow, look, there's only ever been one Ron Paul in all of American history. Maybe there's something about power that precludes Ron Paul's from being there. Maybe he's just the exception that proves the rule, that this is not for you and it never will be for you. People have gotten the wrong lesson, I think, where they should be dropping out of politics completely. They're joining up. But my slide against the LP there is that the LP always thinks that they're going to do really good this time if they only run a Rand Paul. If only they act more like, wishy-washy Republicans, then they will appeal to more people. When, of course, that never works, because if people can vote for a Republican that doesn't stand a chance against the Democrat, or a Republican who does, and they lean right, well, they're going to vote for a Republican, not a Libertarian. So where they should have been trying to get, purists like Ron. I mean, he did run in '88, and of course Harry Brown was really good in '96 and 2000. But where they ought to be trying to get someone who's a real purist libertarian, they're always, going for the Bob Barr or the Gary Johnson, or somebody who they believe is more electable because of how libertarian he isn't. And of course it never works, and of course they never learn the lesson, and they continue on. So you want to fast forward to 2016, there's no Paul of any description in the presidential election. Who are they going to vote for? Well, you can guess that the Libertarian nominee that year is going to be completely unsupportable. It's going to be Wayne Allen Root, or his stupid cousin, or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, I think they're going to go with Gary Johnson again. Just my prediction. But
why not?
Yeah, why? But why isn't Gary Johnson a libertarian?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know. I don't know. Unfortunately, the unfortunate problem with him. I really like the guy, or I've always wanted to like the guy, but it seems like he just doesn't. He doesn't hate injustice. You know what I mean? He kind of, freedom seems to work a little bit better than all this central planning, so maybe we should try that a little bit, guys. But he doesn't seem to really mind innocent people being bombed, innocent people being jailed. Whatever kind of injustices tend to motivate libertarians to be libertarians. For him, it seems like he's never really got around to thinking about these things. He's a Republican who realized that, the drug war doesn't really make all that much sense. But is he really an individualist? I don't think so.
Do you believe a lot of Ron Paul supporters are still holding out hope for Tampa, some surprise victory at the convention? Do you have any hope?
Well, I have a fantasy about it, but no, I don't think that anything like that's going to happen. I don't think that Ron Paul is trying to make that happen, or whatever, you know what I mean? That I don't think he really could get away with it, even if somehow the majority of the delegates were really Ron Paulians. He didn't win a single state. I mean, not really, I guess. In Iowa, he won the delegates technically and whatever, but when it comes to the popular vote in the caucuses or in the primaries as they were held, he didn't win a single state. So even though it would be fair, and the process is the process, and Paulian delegates who got elected and followed the rules have every right to be who they are and whatever, ultimately it would look unfair. It would look like he was stealing the nomination that rightly belonged to Mitt Romney, as crazy as that might sound. And so, I think even if he really did secretly somehow have a majority of the delegates, he's just not in any real position to pretend that he really won this thing and that the Republicans have to nominate him. And even if the Republicans did have to nominate him through some technicality, they would all immediately turn their support to Barack Obama, and not Ron Paul.
Yeah, Doug Weed, he was just on RonPaulTribune.com with Tracy Diaz and Josh Tolley, and he's still going around telling people that there's a chance, or there's some fight left for Ron Paul. Do you think he's purposely misleading, or he just genuinely believes what he's saying?
Well, I really don't know very much about that guy or what his shtick is. And if you're Ron Paul in this situation, what are you supposed to do with your delegates? You can't really get the nomination. You can push for a change in the platform, which doesn't really amount to anything. What else can you do with it? It's not like he has the pull to make himself vice president or something like that. And so, if he plays his cards right, he can give a big speech and tell the Republican Party what they ought to be like, or warn them that the future is coming and the young people today don't like the central bank and the wars and that kind of thing. But I don't think he can really score much bigger than that at this convention. If weed is promising anything bigger than that, I wouldn't know what. Sorry to be the rainy cloud on this parade. I'm Ron Paul's biggest fan in the whole wide world. If there was some way that we could go back and you could tell me what I got to do to get it through the American people's thick freaking skull that this is their last chance for the Bill of Rights, then I would do it. I just don't know. It's too late now, I think.
You've been very critical of Jesse Benton. What did he do wrong as campaign manager, and what would you have done differently?
Well, what he did wrong was he ran Ron Paul as a conservative. If you're a brand X Republican, or for that matter, liberal, Democrat. If you're a Democrat, you got to run to the left in the primary. If you're a Republican, you got to run to the right in the primary, and then you run to the center in the general election, so that you get those swing voters, the moderate vote, and whatever. And that's whether you're talking about Congress or whether you're talking about the presidency, right? This is what Mitt Romney and his Etch-a-Sketch, right? I got to pretend to be a right-winger as much as I can during the primary so that the conservatives won't spit me out. But then once I got the nomination, now I got to run to the left so I can convince all the swing voters I'm just as Obama is, that kind of thing. Well, so with Ron Paul, this truth should not apply at all. He's Ron Paul. He's changing the whole game. He's conserving classical liberalism. He's completely breaking the mold of what it means to be a conservative or a liberal or any of these things. And so, where it's true that conservatives don't like Ron Paul's war position, the thing to do would be to go ahead and take charge and lead them on foreign policy and tell them, if you're really conservative and you really want to conserve what's great about this society, we've got to knock off this crazy revolutionary foreign policy right now. And go ahead and try it, because what do you have to lose? You saw what happened. They ran him to the right, and the born-again Christians of America, the religious right-wing Republicans of America, lined up to vote for Newt Gingrich, sinner, converted Catholic, Rick Santorum, the Catholic. Not that I have anything wrong with Catholicism or Mormonism. I'm just saying, to born-again right-wing conservative American Protestants, they would rather line up to vote for two Catholics and a Mormon, all of whom are horrible on everything, all of whom, Santorum, regardless of his personality as seeming like a mean old right-wing or whatever, you look at his voting record, he and Gingrich and Romney, all three of them are progressive, Rockefeller, Republican, centrist types, all of them, none of them conservative at all. And what does the religious right do? They line up to vote for these three schmucks before Ron Paul, who is actually, quote unquote, one of them, who actually is a baby doctor who never performed a single abortion, right? Who is the taxpayer's best friend for 40 years straight, but he's for peace. And they are bloodthirsty cannibals, and they will never accept a peace candidate. And so he was never really for them anyway. They tried to run him to the right and say, well, Ron Paul, he's a war hero. He was in the Air Force. He's a conservative Republican like you. They weren't buying it. But what he could have been doing the whole time is running just as him. And they could have made all of the TV ads instead of lame attack ads against Newt Gingrich. They could have all just been inspirational clips of Ron Paul at the podium saying, we have got to stop doing this, this, and that. They could have shown him, obviously, predicting the housing bubble back in 2001 and 2. They could have shown him predicting that the war in Iraq was going to cost a bunch of money and make our terrorism problem worse. They could have shown him, warning time and again and again and again that we don't have to sacrifice our liberty for our security. And these clips on YouTube of him saying these things about peace and liberty and real economics. These are the things that made millions love him. This should have been the cornerstone of the campaign. Never mind running to the right. We're trying to move the entire country now to a libertarian point of view. And he would have lost anyway, but it would have been a much more powerful campaign, I think, than trying to say, here's a picture of him in his Air Force uniform from a long, long time ago, as though that's his legacy, as though he's Ron Paul, the Republican who served, rather than Ron Paul, the anti-war Republican, right? That was what was special about him. And I think because Jesse Benton is not a libertarian, and for that matter, a lot of the people running the campaign up there, they just never understood what was so special about Ron Paul in the first place, I guess, or they would have put what was so special about him in the damn TV ads.
It looks like Ron Paul, with his leftover campaign cash, is going to be giving it again to Campaign for Liberty. That's just a prediction. I don't know if he's definitely doing that yet. If he does, do you agree with that maneuver? And if not, what should he do with his leftover campaign cash?
Well, I really don't know about that. I hadn't really considered. For my taste, I would say that his old organization, I don't know if this still exists, but he used to have this thing called FREE, the Foundation for Rational Economic Education, something like that. His own, tiny little think tank that just, published small things and distributed them, that kind of thing. To me, that's where it's at. It's all about education. It's all about getting people to understand libertarianism as that, unified field theory of human liberty, the way he sells it. So, supporting this, that, or the other candidate for the House of Representatives, to me, it's just not worth it. It's just, Ron Paul's tenure in the House of Representatives proves that, look back at history. He's the only one like him. So, trying to replicate him, I don't know all the details, but I hear horror stories about all the guys who are the proclaimed Ron Paul followers in the House, the people who want to be just like him, and yet they always fall short. They always vote for some foreign aid or raise some debt ceiling or whatever terrible thing. Because they're, look, if they really were that good, they wouldn't be allowed in the House, or they certainly wouldn't last more than a term or two. The only reason I believe that he was able to keep going back to the Congress is because he basically delivered half of the population of his district. So you have entire families where we're the Johnsons, and all 7 of us vote Paul every time. You know what I mean? But nobody else has that. Nobody else has that advantage. And so when the powers that be decide that, this congressman or that one is a bit too libertarian for their taste, they'll be gone, assuming they even make it one term at all, get elected in the first place. So I really don't think that politics is the place to spend the resources. I think that, whatever it costs to get Jeff Regenbach to read some more Rothbard into a tape recorder and post that up on the YouTube, that's really the best way to spend libertarian resources.
Just one last one. You said you don't think Romney will win. Why are you saying that? With how badly Obama's doing, you would figure anybody could beat Obama right now.
Well, I got to admit, when it comes to breaking down the red and the blue states and precincts and all that electoral politics stuff, I'm terrible. I mean, for all I know, in the most important swing states, Obama's behind by 10 or something like that. I don't know about that. All I know is just from my overall impression, it occurs to me that even though Obama's been a disaster and even though the economy is in terrible shape and, still is, that he's got this thing about him where no matter how horrible he is, the people who support him still support him, no matter what he does. I mean, he could kill the children himself with his bare hands live on TV, and the Hope and Change crowd is still going to completely support him. Whereas no one loves Mitt Romney. I don't even think his own sons love him. No one loves him. He's disgusting. He's a horrible, terrible person. And people can tell just by looking at him that, this guy, he's the kind of guy who was in the news. He called the cops on a guy for smoking a joint on the beach there in California where, his third mansion in the same spot is. And just there's no one in America who can relate to him outside of the country club. The old beer test. Which candidate would you rather sit and have a beer with? People could believe that there was a little bit of redneck in George W. Bush that they could relate to, that he was a real person somehow. Wasn't true, but they, PR wise, they could be convinced of that. Mitt Romney is just, to me, I just can't imagine any group of people coming around. They can't even find a quote from anybody who likes him about what they like about him. Why do you support Mitt Romney? And they go, I don't know. Nobody even knows. Whereas Obama's might as well be Charles Manson, the cult leader. So, exactly what that says about, the Israel lobby obviously prefers Romney. I think it's very likely that a lot of the Wall Street banks prefer Romney. That kind of thing. So maybe the advantage is his. But it just seems to me who would the average American idiot support? I think that they still would prefer Obama. Romney reminds them too much of the guy that fired them.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Thank you very much for having me.